Welcome everyone to the long-awaited 7 Simul tutorial for the Rubik's Clock. This video will be broken up into segments, so if there's a certain one you want to jump to, I'll leave timestamps in the description. So before I teach you all this method, I'll explain what it actually is. 7 Simul is an advanced and efficient method for solving the clock, and if you haven't already done so, I'd recommend learning Sheeran. It's a good way to transition from a method where you flip the clock over to this one. So I'll leave a link to Caleb Shelfer's tutorial for it in the description. The name 7 Simul comes from the fact that we can always solve the clock in 7 or fewer simultaneous moves. So that's what I'm going to teach you how to do. I really believe this method is the future of clock. It's more efficient than other methods and you don't even have to flip it over during the solve. And just to be clear, a simultaneous move is when we have at least one pin facing up. Might be hard to see, but it's this one right here. And the other, pretty much, there's at least one facing down. So we turn dials for both at the same time. So for some brief background information on this method, it was first discovered by Lanqi Zhang in early 2021. Now I could be mispronouncing that name, so I apologize if that's the case. And then in mid-2022, Benjamin Paul discovered it on his own. Once Benjamin discovered it, he ranted about it in the Clock Solver's Discord server, which you can find in the description. And after that, some people got curious about the method. In particular, Caleb Shelfer started playing around with it. And at Sharon Forks 2022, back in September 2022, he showed me how this method works. Ever since, I've been working with Benjamin and Caleb to advance this method, and it's already paying off. Using 7 Simul, I got a 2.97 North American record single, which is second in the world. It's now January 2023, and I didn't intend to wait this long, but I got quite busy and couldn't really fit in time to make this tutorial. But now that the method's had success, I figured what better time to share it than now. Now, there are a lot of interesting things about this method, like the math behind it and techniques that can take it to the next level. However, this video is aimed towards people who want to learn the method without too much difficulty, as it's very possible to get really fast with this method, even in its most basic form. For that reason, I'm going to try explaining the method in as simple terms as possible. If you eventually want to see more about 7 Simul, I'll probably make more videos in the future. When you're watching this, make sure you pause and rewind it whenever you need to, because if you're going to go through it all in one go, you're probably not going to understand all of it. But now that I've done a lot of talking, let's start learning. I'll assume you already know how to solve and scramble the clock with the notation people normally use. So for this method, there are just a few other quick things. You need to understand how the pieces are labeled. C stands for the center, and we have the edges, which are just one letter, so U for up, R for right, D for down, and L for left. And then the corners are 2 letters each, so UR, UL, DL, and DR. Also, I'm going to represent the side we start memorizing from with lowercase letters, so for example, lowercase c. And the other side is going to have uppercase letters, for example, uppercase R. And by the way, whenever we're inspecting, we're always going to be doing X2 rotations to switch between the two sides. And a quick tip, if you're confused at all, is that the side we start memorizing from is opposite from the side we start solving from. So when we're actually about to start the solve, the uppercase side is going to be in front of us. Now, when we actually start the solve, there is also going to be notation for the different pin positions we can have. So if we have, let's say, UR and DL, that's going to be a forward slash. You can kind of see like with the shape of my finger. And then the other two, UL and DR, that's a backslash. If we have lowercase letters for a pin position, like let's say lowercase DL, that means every pin except for the DL pin will be facing up. Whereas uppercase, of course, just means that's the only pin. So this would be uppercase DL. Okay, so follow along with this example scramble that I'm going to do so that I can run you through how the memorization process works. By the way, you might have noticed I was using pinky for bottom turns during that scramble. And while it's pretty hard to get used to if you're used to turning with your thumb, I strongly recommend just trying to switch as soon as possible because it'll benefit you in the long run. So let's start memorizing from this angle. In total, you'll have to memorize 5 letters, although I probably recommend memorizing 6 because it just helps to make things flow better. So the way I'm going to teach you how to do it, we'll have 6 letters to memorize and break it up into 3 pairs of letters. And those pairs of letters are going to be made into words or sounds, just like how people solving blind would do it. If you have no experience with blind, don't worry, I'll show you how to make letter pairs. Okay, so the first thing we look for on the lowercase side, C minus D. Now, I'm about to say something very important. Whenever we have something minus something else, it's whatever the thing at the second clock has to do to get to the first clock. So when C minus D, D is the second clock, we're trying to see what this has to do to get to the center clock. So if we look at the D clock, it's at 10 o'clock right now. we look at the C clock, it's at 8 o'clock. So the D clock has to do a -2 to get to 8 o'clock. When I'm memorizing, I don't see like what the numbers are for each clock. So I'm not like, oh, this is 10, this is 8. I just see how far apart they are from each other. So since this has to do 2 ticks counterclockwise to get to this facing the same way as this clock, that means we have a -2. One thing to note is that -2 and 10 are the same thing on clock because the two numbers are 12 off from each other, so it's just like doing a full circle. So now that we've figured out a number to memorize, I'm going to show you how to convert it to a letter. Pretty much 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, and so on, like the alphabet. So if we went up all the way up to 11, that would be K, the 11th letter. For 12 o'clock, since it's like doing 0, I just like to use the letter O. Now remember, -2 is our number, and that's equivalent to 10, because -2 is 12 away from 10. J is the 10th letter of the alphabet, so that's the letter we memorized, J. The next thing we have to memorize is DR minus R. Remember, it's what the second thing has to do, so R, to get to the first thing. So this R, imagine it doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's doing 5 ticks in the counterclockwise direction to get to the point where it's facing the same way as this. So since it's counterclockwise, it's negative, so we have a -5. But we're not quite done yet, so don't convert that to a letter. We're going to flip this over, and now on the uppercase side, we're going to do U minus L. L is the second thing, so it has to do 1, 2, 3, so that it's facing the same way as U. So that's a 3. Now with the two numbers we just found, -5 and 3, we're just going to add them together. So -5 plus 3 is -2. And now we're ready to convert it to a letter. So remember, -2 is just like 10, and J is the 10th letter. So once again, we have J. So now comes the point where we make a word or a sound, because we have 2 letters, and this is the whole idea of letter pairs. Pretty much we're just making our memorization easier. So when I have the 2 letters J and J, I just like to think of the sound Jage. You can pretty much do whatever works for you. Like if you have BG, you might think of a bag. CA, you might think of California. Pretty much just do whatever you think of. But just like Jage, which is what I did, it doesn't have to be like a real word. For DA, for example, you could just do the sound da. That's what I do, actually. Now, let's move on. We have Jage as our memorization so far, and hopefully you didn't forget that there were 2 parts to the second letter we memorized. If you forgot, that's okay. It's -5 and 3. And the third letter is actually super easy. It's just the opposite of the second part of our second letter. So remember, we had -5 and 3. So our second number is 3. The opposite of that is -3. So now that we have the number -3, we're just going to make it into a letter. We add 12 to make it positive, and that would be 9. The 9th letter of the alphabet is I. So I is the third letter we have. So now we're going to flip back over to the lowercase side and memorize our 4th letter. It's lowercase d minus lowercase r. So r has to do a 1, 2, 3. It's going counterclockwise, so that would be a -3, so that it's facing the same way as the d clock. So that's a -3, and once again, that becomes 9, which is I, the 9th letter of the alphabet. So we have 2 I's, and now we're just going to make that into a sound. I like to use the word I, like eyeball. So far the memorization is Jage, I. This next one's a bit long, and there are quite a few ways to do it, but I'll show you 2 main ways. First will be the way I do it, and then just another way that might end up working for you. So we're going to flip back over to the other side. So this one's going to be uppercase UR minus U plus C minus D, and then we flip back to the lowercase side, plus L minus UL plus R. So here's how I would do that. We're going to treat UR minus U as its own thing at first, because those are the first 2 clocks we're looking at. So UR minus U. U is the second thing. And, well, it doesn't have to do any movement to be facing the same way as you are because they're already matching. So we have 0 as our number in mind so far. Now we're just going to go 1 clock at a time, so plus C. Now when we add, it's just like doing a move. So if the center clock is here and we do a 0 to it, it's just going to stay in the same spot. So we still think of this as if it's just right here. Now we're subtracting D. So we treat D as the second number in the subtraction operation, just like how we've been doing normal subtraction. So pretty much what does D need to do to get to here? So in this case, D needs to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the number we have in mind is 5. Now we're going to flip this over and add it to the L clock. So that means we're doing the move 5. So that would end up right here. Just picture it facing this way. So now we're subtracting UL. We're treating UL as our second number in a subtraction, so we're just seeing what does UL need to do to face the same way as this imaginary clock, which we imagined, remember this, to be over here. And well, if it's facing this way and UL is also facing this way, then the difference is 0. So That's what the result of the subtraction would be. The last thing we do is add it to this R clock. But since it's just a 0, we don't have to do any moves to this R clock, so it stays here. So this ends up at 1 o'clock, and we are finally ready to convert this number into a letter. A is the first letter of the alphabet, so we just have the letter A. Now, I'm just going to show you a different way to memorize that, in case you find it easier. But if you think you're good with that other one, feel free to skip to this timestamp to skip over this part. So we can also think about the thing we just did as something broken down into chunks. Make sure we're starting on the uppercase side. So the first chunk would be U minus C plus D, and then we would flip to the lowercase side. Our next chunk would be UL minus L, and our last one would be DR minus R. So pretty much we're going to add those three things together and then take the opposite. So for the first chunk, U minus C plus D, let's do U minus C first. Remember, C is the second thing in this subtraction operation, so it has to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, so that it's facing the same way as the U clock. So that's 4, and now we add it to D. Adding is just like doing a move, so if this were to do a 4, it would end up right here. So since the clock is upside down, this would actually be 11 o'clock or -1. Now there's a quick shortcut we could do for that sometimes. Let's say if we have C and D matching like this. Pretty much since it doesn't matter which order we add things in, we could do D minus C first. Because D and C are just facing the same way, so D minus C would be 0. And then we would just add that to the U clock, which means we're not actually doing anything to it, so it stays here, which is 11 o'clock. Since the clock is upside down, right? So it's like right here, which is -1 or 11, depending on how you want to look at it. Back to the scramble, we flip for the next chunk. On the lowercase side, it's UL minus L. L is the second thing, so to get to UL, it has to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, for the last chunk, DR minus R. R is the second thing, so we're just seeing what does R need to do to get to here. Well, we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ticks in the counterclockwise direction for this to be facing the same way as this. So that would be a -5. So now we have to add the three numbers from those chunks together. So we had a -1, 5, and -5. So -1 plus 5 is 4. And then -5 is -1. Now remember, if we're doing it this way, we have to take the opposite at the very end. So instead of -1, it just becomes +1. Since we have 1, it's the letter A, and we're finally ready to move on. Now, of the two ways I just showed you, you can choose whichever works best for you. In solves, I memorized the first way, but you just might find the other way easier. I will make a slight concession in saying that if you learned the second way, this last move will be especially easy, because it's basically the same clocks as before, but the ones we did on the lowercase side are actually going to be on the uppercase side, and vice versa. And the only other small difference between this and the second way of what I just showed you is that for this one, we don't have to take the opposite of whatever number we have at the very end. So I guess here we go. It's going to be broken down into 3 chunks, and we're just going to add 3 things together. So on the lowercase side, U minus C plus D, and then we flip over. We do UL minus L, and DR minus R. So for the first chunk on the lowercase side, U minus C, that would be a -1, because C has to do 1 tick this way to get to U. And then we're just going to add that -1 to D. So imagine the D clock doing a -1, and that would end right here at 9 o'clock or -3. By the way, sometimes there's a quick shortcut for this, and if you watched the second way of doing the previous thing, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, you can go to this timestamp. So now we're going to flip it over to the uppercase side. Okay, so for UL minus L, L would have to go 6 in either direction to get to UL, so that's a 6. And lastly, DR minus R. Well, R has to do a 1, 2, 3 to face the same way as DR, so yeah, that's a 3. So our 3 things were -3, 6, and 3. So we're going to add all those together and get a total of 6. Now, F is the 6th letter of the alphabet, so the pair we have is AF. I like to use the sound AF. So in total, our memorization is JAF. Okay, so when we finish memorization, we end up on the uppercase face, and this is where we start solving from. So first thing you want to do is put the pins in the lowercase DL position. Remember, that means that all the pins except for DL are facing up. So we're going in order of our memorization. For the first letter, we're going to use our left hand, and for the second letter, we're going to use our right hand. So with JAGE, well, J is first, so we would do this down pin move with our left hand. So the letter J corresponds to the number 10, which is also equivalent to -2 on clock. So we'll do a -2 with our left hand. And then our second letter in the pair, which is also J, we'll do with our right hand. So -2. Now we're going to go in the R position, which means these 2 pins are up and these 2 are down. And the letter pair we have is I, or the letter I twice. Now this second simultaneous move is the only exception to the left hand first thing. Let's say we had IK instead of II. This time, like we would be doing the K with our left hand and the I with our right hand. But since we ended up getting I twice, we can think about it as just doing the second I with our left hand and the first I with our right hand. Besides this second simultaneous move, the others do have the first letter corresponding to your left hand and the second letter corresponding to your right. Now what we're going to do is going to pin position DR, and we're going to basically just intuitively make this 2x2 block in the top left. So with my right hand, I'll pair the center up with these edges, and with my left hand, I'll pair this corner up with these other pieces. Now our position is backslash, which remember means UL and DR are up. And we have AF, so A. And remember, now we're back to doing the first thing with our left hand. So A would be like that. A is the number 1. And then F in our right hand, F is the 6th letter, so we would be doing a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The rest is actually intuitive. So we're going to go into pin position UL, and we're trying to make this 3x2 block on the left. So what I'm going to do is match all these up with this edge right here. And with my right hand, I'm going to match this corner with all these other things. So it would look like that. Now we're going to go into pin position L and pretty much match everything except for this UR corner. So I'm going to match these things with the edge like that. And then with this hand, I'll match the corner with all these other things. So that matches the corner. And our last pin position is going to be lowercase UR, so everything except for UR up. And we're literally just solving the clock from here. To clear things up, let's do another example, but this time I won't explain small details as much, so follow along with the scramble. Alright, here's how it looks. We'll start from here and do C minus D like before, so C minus D. D has to do a 5 to get to C. So with the number 5, we memorize the letter E. Now we're going to do DR minus R. That would be a 3, and we'll flip it over. And to do uppercase U minus L. These are 6 apart from each other. So we have 3 and 6. We add 3 and 6 to get 9, or negative 3, which is the letter I. When I get E and then I like to think of E-I-E-I-O from the good old nursery rhyme, Old MacDonald Had a Farm. But literally just do what works for you. Don't be afraid to be creative, but also it helps to kind of use the same word or sound every time you get a certain letter pair. So I'm not going to switch it up and use something different for EI if I get it again. Now we negate the second part of the letter we just memorized. So we have 3 and then 6, so the second part was 6, which just becomes negative 6, which is actually equivalent to 6, right? Because negative 6 and 6 are 12 off from each other. So that would be the letter F. Now we flip back over and do D minus R, which is a 6, so that'd be another F. So when you get F and then F, you could use the sound foof. Now for this long one, I'll do it both ways. So we flip over to the uppercase side. We start with UR minus U, that's 4. Now add it to C, so C goes over here. And then this minus D, this has to do a negative 2 to match with this imaginary clock facing this way. So we're at negative 2, and then we flip it over. Add it to this, so do a negative 2, it ends up right here. Now subtract this. Well, this has to do a negative 2, right, to end up facing the same way as this imaginary clock. So the number we have in mind is negative 2. Now lastly, we add that number to this. So we're just doing a negative 2 to this clock. So 1, 2. And it ends up right here, 3 o'clock, and that's the letter C. Now I'll just show you the other way quick in case that's how you want to do it. So we have the first chunk, U minus C plus D. U minus C is 2. And then we add that to D. So 1, 2. And it ends up at 6 o'clock. So we have 6. Now next chunk, UL minus L. Well, these are matching, so it's 0. And then this other chunk, DR minus R, that's a 3. So we have 6, 0, and 3. Those add to 9, or negative 3. And remember, if we do it this second way, we have to take the opposite at the very end. So negative 3 just becomes 3, which, of course, is going to give the same outcome of the letter C. Alright, so now for the last one. On the lowercase side, U minus C plus D. So U minus C, that would be a 5. We add it to D, so we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We end up at 4 o'clock. So we have 4. And then UL minus L, well, that's just 0 because these are matching, so 4 and 0. Now DR minus R. R has to do with negative 5 to get to DR. So we have 4, 0, and negative 5. Does that up to negative 1 in total? So negative 1 or 11, depending on how you want to think about it, that's the letter K. because K is the 11th letter of the alphabet. We have C and then K, so our word can be clock. In total, we have E-I-E-I-O, foof, clock. From the pin position lowercase dl, we'll do the E with our left hand, so E is 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I with our right hand, so -3. Now we'll be in pin position R, and do foof, so FF. Since they're both F, even if we switched it around, it wouldn't change anything. Let's just say we have the first F and second F. When we actually memorize, we can switch those two. The second F is the one we're doing with our left hand, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because F is the 6th letter. And then the first F we're doing with our right hand. Because remember, the second simultaneous move is the only time we switch those around. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we go to pin position DR and make this 2x2 block intuitively. Like that. Now backslash. And we have clock. So C with our left hand, so 1, 2, 3. And -1 with our right hand, just like that. Now from pin position UL, we'll make this whole 3x2 block. And from pin position L, we'll match everything except for this UR corner. Now lastly, from pin position lowercase UR, we'll finish the solve. Just a quick disclaimer, I used random scrambles for both of those walkthroughs, and unfortunately both times we happened to have the same letter twice for the second letter pair. But just know that that second letter pair is the exception, where we want to do the first letter with our right hand and the second letter with our left hand. When I'm actually inspecting before I start solving, what I like to do is switch around my two letters for that pair so that I don't have to figure it out during the solve. So if I have J and then C, I just switch it to CJ, and then I know, okay, I can do the C with my left hand and the J with my right hand. So that's about it. I tried to make this tutorial as clear as I could, but there's definitely a lot to this method, so make sure you let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or anything else you might want to learn about this method. 7-Simul does have a somewhat steep learning curve, so you may find yourself struggling to inspect in under 15 seconds. My main advice would be to do lots of cells at first. Something I did when learning 7-Simul was essentially just mentally running myself through the different combinations of clocks I would have to memorize for each move and the order I would have to memorize them in. And you can also run yourself through like the execution process, so like the different pin positions and the order they come up in, if you think that'll help you. Once you have the process down and you're trying to get faster at memorization, you can use a training tool by Joshua Marriott, which I'll leave a link to down in the description. But yeah, besides that, good luck with learning 7-Simul. And if you made it to this point, congratulations and thank you for watching.